and I will then move quickly to our regular board meeting and call that meeting to order, noting that we have a quorum. And let me begin by first welcoming Dr. Michael Cummings to our board. Dr. Cummings is the newly elected president of the medical dental staff. So Mike, congratulations and thank you and welcome. And with that, I'm sure everyone has read the minutes. So unless there are any additions, deletions, or corrections, we'll approve them as presented. Thank you. I'll go right to the resolutions, starting with Jen Persico on service contracts. Jen?
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you all. I can report that the Contracts Committee met on January 19th to review the contracts that are 1 year or longer. We talked about and discussed the contracts listed that I think you have in your information. First, I guess I would say if anybody has any questions, please feel free to jump in. The committee carefully considered all of those contracts and after doing so recommends that the board approve those contracts.
Thank you, Jen. I'll assume that Jen will make that motion. Is there a second, please?
Second by Jim Lewicki.
Thank you, Jim. Further discussion or questions for Jen? Seeing none, we'll come immediately to a vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And the contrary? That motion carries. On naming spaces, Dr. Quattrochi.
Sorry. Yes, before you, you have the naming of certain spaces and structures continuing from our capital campaign. So looking for approval of that resolution.
Motion will be made by Sharon, if you would, please.
So moved.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Jen. Further questions or conversation about the naming? If there are none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And to the
Aye.
contrary. That motion carries as well. Thank you all, everyone. Dr. Cummings, medical dental staff minutes.
Thank you very much, John. Take a moment, my first meeting, and really looking forward to working with Tom, Brian, the board, in my new capacity. And I apologize if this is out of order, but if you'll indulge me for a second, I just wanted to highlight from the prior meeting, Michelle Marshall's incredible role at ECMC when I became executive director for behavioral health. One of the service lines we could kind of leave alone was outpatient chemical dependency because she did such a wonderful job there. And just to highlight the accolades of the hospital, several people know this, many people do not, but I had the misfortune of contracting COVID and being hospitalized at ECMC for about 6 days. The fortune was that I was hospitalized at ECMC for 6 days, and I can tell you, as almost a role of undercover boss, it was simply exquisitely wonderful care from start to finish from a lot of staff who did not necessarily know they were treating a medical director. So it was wonderful. Today we have the minutes from the January meeting. There was no December MedExec meeting, so there's a January meeting within your packet for your review, as well as the minutes from the credentialing committee. Because there was no board of directors meeting or MedExec meeting in December, there was several temporary privileges that were passed on. I did not realize that the largest role I would have would be signing several hundred documents as I walked into the medical staff office the other day. Just at a 10,000 foot level for the board's note, we had in December 4 resignations, 6 initial applications. Of note, Dr. Scott Nodzo from orthopedics was credentialed at that point, and he is joining Kathleen Boyle, who was credentialed in November 2020. And that's a huge, as I believe Dr. Stegman pointed out in his quality meeting, a huge addition to the ECMC family on many, many venues, especially now that elective surgeries are again being entertained in New York State. We had 33 reappointments as well in December. In January, we had 4 resignations, 7 initial applications, and 26 reappointments to staff. So a little bit of turnover, several new people coming on that are all very strong members to the ECMC team, and present these for the board's approval.
Thank you, Dr. Cummings. Any other questions for Michael on those appointments?
Mike, it's Katie. I think when I looked at the credentials report from January, maybe, there were 3 staff members that I think the board would like to recognize that were suggested for emeritus staff. I don't know if you'd like to mention it, or I'm going to defer to you.
Actually, Kay, could you do that? Because I do not have that
Yeah.
breakdown in front of me.
So 3 members were recognized as emeritus staff that I think the board knows well: Dr. Gregory Bennett, Dr. Pranikoff, and Dr. Dan Schaefer, who is an ophthalmologist that's been well known in our community for a while. So just for the board's recognition that those were very well-respected clinicians, that any one of us would have any family member refer to any of them, and we will miss their influence and their largesse. So thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Grimm. Thank you, Dr. Cummings. Michael has made the motion. Is there a second?
Sharon will second.
Thank you, Sharon. All in favor of that motion on the medical dental staff, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed. Thank you all very much. Dr. Murray on chiefs of staff and associate chiefs. Dr. Murray's on mute.
Thank you. As I believe the board is aware, chiefs of service and their associates are appointed by the board on my recommendation. They serve for varying terms, 3 years and 1 year. So in order to ensure that their terms turn over on the appropriate time, generally their first year, it's kind of like a probationary year for 1 year, and then they go to 3-year cycles. So we have had the tradition of my presenting the complete slate. There's no new chiefs that we're proposing at this time, but we present the complete sheet, which is in your package for your approval. People who were appointed during the course of this year were Anthony DePlato to anesthesiology, Dr. Rich Spiro to neurosurgery, Dr. Susan Griffiths for obstetrics and gynecology, and Dr. Douglas Drumsta in radiology. All the other chiefs are returning. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Otherwise, I would ask for the board's approval of the slate of chiefs of service.
Thank you, Dr. Murray. Dr. Murray's made that motion. Is there a second?
John will
Mike
second.
Seaman, second.
Seconded by Mike Seaman. Further discussion, conversation, questions? Seeing none, we'll come to a vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed. Thank you, Dr. Murray, and please extend our congratulations to all of those chiefs of service who have been either appointed or reappointed. I do have a question before we go to back to Tom for his report. Dr. Cummings, are we going to need a new business card for this one more title for you for ECMC?
Well, we'll have to see how that works out. You know, I am, as we have talked, John, I am struggling with the duality of being a associate medical director and president of medical staff at the same time. And yet, I think with
along with 7 or 8 other titles, as I understand it. So.
Well, and with Tom and Tom's and Brian's guidance, I think we're going to navigate those waters fine. But you know, I was looking back at this. I've been part of ECMC as a med student since '94, as a resident since '98, and as an attending since 2002. And To be honest, I have had doing what I do in the world of autism, which is a very niche field. There are weekly opportunities to travel to major medical centers and take on new positions. As you know, I run programs in New York City and am starting to run programs in California, and I would not call any other hospital other than ECMC my home. So I'm really happy to be here, remain here, and be part of the ECMC family.
And we are obviously very thrilled to have you, Michael. So congratulations again, and thank you for all of your great service. So moving on, Tom, anything further to report other than what you've done on the annual report, the annual meeting?
No, just as I sent an email around, and I know I've spoken to a few individually, as you know, about, I don't know, it's been about 3 weeks ago, I received a call from the state asking for myself and ECMC to be part of the leadership hub with Mark Sullivan from the Catholics and also Dean Kane from the medical school and with Kathy Hochul leading. So that has been taking up a lot of time. But you know, we know that this is important work for our community and making sure our community is well served. So I'm happy to be part of making sure that when we do get doses, because as you know, there's no doses at this point, that it's done in the most equitable way. And in that regard, that's been kind of the leadership role I've been asked to take within the hub, is to really facilitate the health equity task force made up of about 50 people from all 5 counties of Western New York, with Reverend Blue from the NAACP heading that initiative. It's really been, again, I think planning for the day when we have a lot of doses, I think will be rewarding. Right now, everybody wants doses, so it's kind of hard to be equitable when there's no doses. But I think, you know, we have been I have been very vocal with regard to making sure that we serve those vulnerable populations who frankly have not had access to this point with regard to the vaccine, whether that be in the inner city of Buffalo or that be in the rural area of Allegheny County. We need to make sure that everybody has access because, as you know, it's been very technology focused as far as how you would register, which is not obviously friendly to those folks who may not have internet service or the technology to access. So proud to be part of it. It's been a struggle, as you have read in the papers, so I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But hopefully, as with the new announcement we just heard of, we'll be getting lots of doses. So we'll see. Happy to answer any questions with regard to the vaccination process in Western New York.
Thank you, Tom. I would just add that, as some of you know, Tom has single-handedly taken the leadership of that hub, much to his chagrin, I know at times. But absent his leadership and the confidence that everyone from the governor to the lieutenant governor to our local elected officials have had in him, and with the job that he's done at ECMC, this community would be in far worse shape than it's at. So, Tom, thank you. And what was a 24/7 job before all this happened now becomes doubly so. So thank you. John Switowski, please.
Okay. I think Jeffra's going to share her screen while she's doing that. So what I'm going to report on today are preliminary results, getting back to the business a little bit here of a finance update. And I know we didn't meet in December, so what I'll do is we'll certainly talk about the year, but definitely wanted to highlight a few things that happened in December, because certainly it did have an impact on our year. And so what you can see here, of course, you did see the year-to-date statistics a bit in the annual meeting, but what's important to note for the month of December is that we did anticipate December being significantly impacted by the restrictions that were put in place on December 4th, of course, related to the surgical volume. And interestingly, when you look at this at a high level, the discharges on inpatient are actually only down for the month from budget about 42 cases, which is about 2.6%. However, when you look down further on this statistics page and you see the total general surgeries, inpatient and outpatient, being down from budget 42% and 46% respectively, what that really tells us is that those significant, severe, high-paying cases were down from our budget, and we supplanted those in many cases with lower reimbursement medical cases. And that's a recipe for, of course, lost revenue, lower reimbursement. That's really evidenced here by the lower case mix index at about 0.12, different from the budget, and that's about 6%. And before we move off this, I think it's important to note, I know Tom mentioned a couple of stats for the year, but it is important to note because, of course, December will have an impact on the year-to-date. But when you look at the year-to-date statistics, we were down about a little over 1,000 discharges from budget. We were down 2,300 or so surgeries from plan, and also in emergency department visits, about 5,300 cases. And so when you look at the next slide, which is the dashboard, the finance dashboard that we've been looking at the last couple of months, Jeffrey, if you could just move to that next slide, please. Thanks. You can see here that those, of course, are depicted here, but that certainly did have an impact on our monthly net income. So we lost about $8 million in revenue for the month, and that coupled with COVID costs, as well as other small year-end adjustments, resulted in about a $14 million loss, with, of course, the additional pension costs, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a few minutes, for the month.
John, that from a revenue perspective, that's about 350,000 a day.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And so just something else to highlight here, and Tom talked about it earlier, a couple of bright spots as we look at the year-to-date statistics, and one on the operating side, and really two on the operating side, but one is the average length of stay. And if you look at it year-to-date, we were only about 1/10 of a day off of our budget during a year in which we saw thousands fewer cases at random times, surges in cases at times that were not unexpected, but came very rapidly, and losses in surgeries. So it's really an interesting dynamic, but what really impacted that were the work on the ground, the blocking and tackling that Tom talked about. The cohorting initiative in particular certainly had an impact here, and really the work and the teamwork between the physician leadership, nursing leadership, and the boots on the ground. The other highlight here on operations, and I'll talk about the days cash in a few minutes, but the FTEs, during a time when, again, we saw much reduced volume, we were able to really hold the line and manage our FTEs through vacancies for at least the tail end of the year, certainly to a level that is roughly the same as where we were last year, but much less than where we had originally budgeted, which certainly has gotten us on the road to recovery here. We're not quite where we need to be, but certainly moving in the right direction. And so translating all of that to the next slide, and we'll focus a little bit on the year-to-date performance, looking at it the same way that we've looked at it the last really all year. And that's, of course, I should start by saying these are preliminary numbers. We're in that part of the year and part of the close process when we're still waiting on a couple of things to come in for year end, the work of others, actuaries and the like. But more importantly, we're waiting for resolution to what we think could be an improvement to this, how much we don't know and when we don't know, and that would be the resolution to the application for additional provider relief fund dollars that we had filed back in November. Those are not yet distributed in full. Some organizations have received theirs, some haven't. I know we've talked about this in the past, but certainly something that we would apply based on the nature of the dollars, back to 2020. Absent any changes with that, where we are today in these preliminary numbers is about where we had expected to be, especially given the surgical losses in December. And that's, if you look at the income loss from operations before the pension, that's about 106 million. And then if you take into account the CARES Act funding relief, the net of those two is roughly 54 million. When we were together in July, I think we were estimating between 40 to 45 million dollar loss with those numbers. With what happened in December, that really did push us into the low 50s. So again, we did really expect to be around that same general vicinity. When you add in the non-cash New York State pension adjustment that we've talked about 37 million, that certainly gets these the net loss into an area that none of us are at all comfortable talking about, but it's the reality of our situation. That 37 million is, for lack of a better word, related to COVID, just based on the timing. It is driven by that timing of when COVID hit and when this valuation date occurred. We wouldn't be seeing this amount of pension expense this year, absent the COVID pandemic. In fact, the markets were streaming the opposite way prior to COVID. So just wanted to note that, because we don't necessarily talk about that as a COVID expense. However, it certainly is one that sits within our income statement and will be one that we'll certainly have to inform others about as to what it is and why it's there.
John, what is the total amount of the relief that we've received from the federal government overall?
It's 52.277 million.
So 53 million.
Yes, a little under 53. It's like about 52.3.
Thank you.
Yes.
And we're still waiting again on that third round of funding. So hoping to hear any day now, because we know some other hospitals have received it. So
Yes, so that, just to highlight that, there's HHS, who doles these monies out, has identified the fact that they've been overwhelmed by applications. They've taken much more time than they had originally published that they would take in terms of review of all those applications. Folks, other organizations in this area, some have received it, some haven't. And it's really dependent upon, how they view the application, what kind of nuances are within the application. And so, we believe, ours may not have been as straightforward, just given the type of entity we are, of course, but also the fact that we've got things like the pension flowing through our income statement that others might not be seeing, given their non-public status.
Let me ask this question at this moment. And maybe Dr. Murray or Dr. Cummings can or Andy can provide some additional information. The ramp up time now to get us back to full service from today until we're back fully operating with all of those surgeries, it will be how long do you think?
Sorry, this is Andy. We met with the surgeons, and we will open up the surgery center on Thursday and resume normal block time on Friday. So it's going to take us a few days. We've gotten inundated with the calls from physicians trying to book cases, so next week will be a busy week, but we will resume block scheduling, like our normal schedule on this Friday.
And Andy, is that right across the board from orthopedics to general surgery to everything else, or is there, are the hips and knees, etc., taking the lead? How's that working?
No, that's everything like normal. General surgery, ortho, everybody's going back into their normal time slots as we've had it before, and then we will continue to work with all the doctors on add-ons and trying to do as many cases as quickly and safely as we can.
And how does that impact our staffing relative to either people out with COVID or childcare or etc.? I mean, is that a factor in this ramp up?
That's not as much of a factor as what we've done over the last 2 months is try to take that staff and put them in other locations throughout the hospital. So we'll have to. So what we've been doing, obviously today, and we'll do over the course of the next 48 hours, is bring that staff back into the OR. And then we'll work with all the other departments where that staff has been at to make sure that those departments have what they need as well. And so that's kind of the reason why you have a couple of day lag, not necessarily from people being out from COVID.
Thank you, Andy. Dr. Murray, any comments? Dr. Cummings?
I think the only caveat I would have, the last time we were able to ramp up very quickly because the hospital was only 2/3 full because we didn't have as many non-COVID patients. We are still very busy. We've already been able, however, to free up. We were using the orthopedic floors as COVID floors. We've actually freed one of them up today in preparation. So for the cases that require inpatient care, there may be some challenges, given how full the hospital is. But I think it seems to be easing down, and I think we can manage, and we're already planning ahead for that.
Thank you, Dr. Murray.
And John, I think, one of the things that we work on day to day, the interface between myself, Dr. Murray, Dr. Cloud, Dr. Marshall, Dr. Bakai is, as the board may or may not be aware of, we have psychiatric patients who are dispersed throughout the med surgical floors because they need to be treated there based on their COVID status. And we've really come up with a way of doing this day to day, moving patients around. So at least from, the behavioral health standpoint, which is, well over half the hospital in a lot of ways, is I think we have a good system, a good moving system to adjust to whatever comes up next. And so what are the next needs for beds? Where do we need to move the next group of patients? I think, COVID has provided us many challenges, but we also have developed very rapid ways of re-cohorting patients, if you will, that maybe didn't exist prior to COVID. So I think it's going to be a challenge for us, particularly when the behavioral health patients are dispersed throughout med-surg. But we have those systems in place with daily huddles, with Karen and her team, with Brian, with behavioral health, and with med-surg and Apogee. So I think we're prepared for the ramp up, and hopefully we can keep elective surgeries open from now on for both our patients as well as for our business purposes.
I agree.
Thank you, Dr. Cummings. Okay, John, didn't mean to interrupt, but I wanted to be sure that we had a good understanding about what we were up against. So, John, if you would please continue.
Sure, thank you. So again, these are preliminary, and I'll be bringing back an update at the next meeting or prior to that, hopefully, when we do find out about the remaining distributions and any other changes. On the next slide, I won't spend too much time, but again, this is just where we are in our process. Nothing's really changed from last year, and you should expect the same schedule this year in terms of our final close, the audit committee work around the audit, and the public filing. We are ready for the auditors to begin. They're starting next week, so that will be underway. And then, as with every other month, I just wanted to keep the board updated as to our overall COVID-19 impacts, as we've been trying to track these. Of course, as we get into January, we'll keep kind of two schedules, one as a total pandemic and one on an annual basis. Of course, this changed rather significantly in December, just given the lost revenue and some of the additional costs. But in total, you can see that, of course, it's grown, but the impact through 12/31 is roughly 96.8 million. That includes capital spend, does not include the pension expense that I referenced earlier. But again, that's right around where we had actually anticipated it being, when we were talking about this back in the summer. And then lastly, just a few other updates on the last slide that I haven't really talked about at length. The days cash you'll see is stable. It's higher than where we had anticipated it to be at year end. It's higher than last year. Last year we were at about 56 days cash at year end. This year we're at about 116. In part, that's been because we do have, if you recall, the next bullet down has we were able to obtain that Medicare loan just as a little bit of a backstop to help throughout the pandemic. That's about $37 million, and that payback though begins April 21st, barring any changes from the Biden administration or any future coronavirus relief bills, of which there is a lot of advocacy around, by the way, to change this. However, nothing's really been set yet. The other two items I just wanted to highlight, of course, as we start to look forward and flip the calendar into 2021, which I know we all want to do, is the executive budget that's on the horizon within New York State. We all know that that's a little bit in flux because we just don't know how much federal aid is coming. But there are several different options that will be undertaken depending upon how much aid is there, and most of those options do result in some cuts, but obviously there's fewer cuts the more aid that's provided. And then Tom mentioned the managed care contract negotiations. These are very important. Our two, I'll say, now they're two largest because we took care of Fidelis last year, but we do have two of the large local major payers due at the end of this year that will expire, and we are planning on negotiating those and taking a similar tack to how we've done this last one this past year. So we're starting
John,
early.
Who are those two?
It's Independent Health and Health Now across.
Thank you.
And they're the full contract, so all products, Medicare, Medicaid, as well as commercial. We are undertaking other negotiations with non-local payers, and I'll keep the board updated as those progress further.
Who does that actual negotiation? Is that you or?
I lead the negotiation, but on the day-to-day negotiation, we have a small team that we've put in place with our contract negotiating VP, as well as Keith Lukasik, who has been participating over the last year and a half in that, just given his breadth of experience and also experience on the risk-based side. And then the way we're organizing this is that team will report back to both myself, but also a small steering group, because these are so integrated with operations, integrated with our physician leadership, and integrated with utilization management and some of those other pieces that are extremely important. We want to make sure we're getting the voice of all of those customers in the negotiation.
Just in terms of the perspective, what is each contract worth approximately?
In terms of revenue?
Yes.
I'll tell you in 1 second here. So Blue Cross is in total, 2019 revenue was about 104 million. And Independent Health is a little over 79.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else, John?
No, nothing else from me. Happy to entertain any questions.
Questions for John on the financials?
John and Starby, I just had a quick question. John, on those two, Independent Health and Blue Cross, about what % of our total payer mix are they, would you say, combined?
Well, I think in total revenue, our total revenue is a little over 700 million. So, you can give that
Okay.
percentage, about 190 million out of 700.
Okay. Thanks.
Yes.
Thanks, Darby. Any other questions for John? Okay, John, thank you. And once again, continuing great job on keeping us, well, I was going to say solvent, but I don't know. We're depending upon how you define solvent, I think we're doing okay.
We are monitoring our position on a weekly basis. And
I do have one other question. On the one of those reports, you showed cash of 116 days.
yes,
That has sort of stayed the same regardless of how much more deeply we've gotten into debt. Just tell the board how we're managing that real briefly, please.
how we're managing on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, the cash on hand.
Yep. So we basically look at it as and forecast out a year on a weekly basis and try to maintain a spend rate and anticipate things like the surgery declines and when that will start to hit. And so we're trying to maintain that, knowing that we're going to have to start to pay back these loans starting in really in April and May timeframe. So every week we're working on it and making sure that we're planning ahead. So one of the things that did help us at year end, though, John, that I know I think I may have mentioned in a prior meeting, is that normally the last few years we've been receiving our disproportionate share, our IGT payment. It's a larger payment that comes from the state through the county in January, February timeframe. This year we actually received that in December, and that will likely continue going forward on that schedule. So that was just a little bit of a difference in the year. That did certainly help that cash balance at year end.
And then, John, can you just remind the board of our budgeted cash position for the end of 2021?
Yes. So I think our budgeted ending cash position was, Tom, keep me honest, 64, 65 days, I believe.
Yes. Yep.
So we don't anticipate any significant alterations from that at this point, but we'll certainly keep the board up to date.
Great, thank you, John. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Tom. Committee reports. Mike Seaman on finance. Anything more to add, Michael?
No, I would just like to take the time to congratulate Tom and his staff, and it's tough to for the budget committee to see these numbers, but obviously we know what's driving them, and we always feel comfortable with Tom and John and Andy with the information we're getting, and it's just a matter of time before we kick everything back in and get back on track. And a lot of uncertainties in regard to how much money we're going to get to help us with this challenge and when we're going to get it. But kudos to the whole team in regards to staying to our mission. Tom, it was really important for someone that's been on the board this long. We haven't strayed away from that, and making sure that we continue to let our employees know how important they are to our mission. And that's also a reflection on how well the care is. So congratulations to you and your staff during a real difficult time. And I think John Danny's has mentioned a lot of things and everything he said throughout this meeting in regards to the job that you and your team has done. So congratulations. We're going to get through this. We got the best team in the country that can get us there. So we're with you all the way.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, John.
You're here.
Thank you, Mike. Audit and compliance, Darby, anything further?
Can you hear me? My mute.
Yes, no, you're good.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so we met on December 17th, 2020. Basically, RSM, our outside independent auditor, kind of gave their plan and areas that they would focus on for their audit for the year, which, as John said, is about to commence. Fried Maxick went through kind of the limited internal audit things that they are still focusing on. Nadine went over our corporate compliance report, and then we also reviewed our litigation and risk management and corporate insurance report with, noting no major issues, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Darby. Questions for Darby? Oh.
Darby, is this the first time that we're using this RSM?
No, they've been with us for quite a few years now.
Okay, when is the last time we put that bid out, that contract for bid out?
That's a good question.
I know we used to try and do it every 5 years. I just wondered if we were still on that kind of timetable.
Sharon, are you asking about the external auditors, RSM?
Yes.
Yes.
They're probably due within the next year or two. I'd have to look at the dates.
Okay.
But that is something that's been that I was thinking about this year. Obviously, with COVID, wasn't the year to really attack that. But that's certainly one that we'd be looking to do very soon, probably in the next year. It is also one that we may be looking to do in combination with our partners in Great Lakes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Darby. Thank you, Sharon. Okay. Ron Bennett, Buildings and Grounds. Ron is on mute, I believe.
Can you hear me?
Now we can. Yeah, please go ahead, Ron.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now.
No.
Ron, you gotta hold your space bar down, Ron. Hold it down to speak.
He's still on mute.
Space bar? Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay, let's go. We had a really short meeting with Jim and Andy and them. Our major projects are done. They finished out the parking lot next to the ED. What a nice place that is for the people to come in and park there. It's just a beautiful job, and it's so convenient. They converted in the old ED a COVID-19 vaccine center. It apparently will be working well. And one of the things they've been going to do to comply with the state and the people with the ninth floor safe room. So the basic things are being really attended to on time and on record. So it's good meeting.
Thank you, Ron. Questions for Mr. Bennett? Okay, on human resources, Bishop Badger, Mike? Did we lose Mike Badger? Well, maybe we have, Tom, anything that you want to report on HR?
No, unless Joe Gilly has something to report.
No, John, we just went over, staffing issues and how we were trying to vaccinate the staff and redeploy some resources from electives to the House and now back to electives again. So it was more about staffing personnel and how most of the staff is really stepping up. That was about the extent of it.
Okay, and Joe, would you just brief everyone on the D&I training that we've been talking about for the board, please?
Yeah, when we were planning on doing the D&I training, we wanted to take it in segments so that you can get the full experience. And what I mean by the full experience is our trainer, Yvonne and Cindy, to do that live and to go through some of those exercises live are so much more impactful than they are to try to do it on video. So for those of you who have done the training and some of us on the executive team have, to go through those exercises live and to be able to engage with one another in that format is much more beneficial. So we did decide that we will put that off a little longer until that such time that we can do that live for the board. And we'll probably divide it in 2 sections. The more intimate the class, the better off it is, and the more actual candidness you get on these kind of trainings. So we beg your patience for just a little while longer, but we are excited to make sure that you really have the full experience of that. I think that each one of you will find a lot of value in that.
Thank you, Joe. Joe, any approximate day? We're talking middle of February, middle of March, April? What's your, at least at this point, what's your thinking?
Well, we want to get out of Orange. We want to make sure that we can get at least 10 people in a room safely with distance, masks, et cetera. So we're kind of looking at our guidance from the governor in terms of the status of, I believe we're still in orange, even though, you know, a lot of things have been challenged. So we're looking for our guidance from the governor and DOH as to when we can get larger groups of people back together. Even in our orientations right now, our orientations are very small. I think I peeked my head in yesterday. I think we had about 6 people in the auditorium, to give you an example of how much we're spacing and what we're doing, and everybody was wearing masks. So probably 7 people total, including the instructor.
Okay, great. Obviously, it's a priority for our board to be able to say that we are doing what we're asking everybody else in the building to do. So as quickly as we can get that done, that is obviously a board priority. So thank you. And by the way, Tom Quattrochi talks to the governor twice a day. So maybe you can get an indication, Tom, when what he's doing.
I
John.
may talk, but I don't know if I get a response. But.
Hey, John, I just wanted to say that I agree with Joe. I have been through D&I training, and it is much better and more impactful. And I think the board will get much more out of it if we can have more people in the room at the time rather than trying to do it virtually. You get nothing out of it virtually. So I'm glad you're going to put it off for a little while longer until we can get back in the room together.
Yep, Joe and Tom will make that call. So great stuff. And thank you guys. QI and patient safety, Mike Hoffert.
Yeah, John, the minutes are in your report there, unless anyone has any questions. In the interest of time, I'll take any questions if anybody has any. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Just real quickly, Andy, give us a 30-second perspective on Leapfrog, please, and where we are with the patient quality issue and some of the stuff that we talked about as a result of our last meeting, please.
Yeah, I think in just 30 seconds, I think we got a team that's meeting on it each month. That team's led by Donna Jones, and it includes Tom and I. I think right now, based on our calculator, we are anticipating looking at probably a B next time. Again, that's a calculation internal calculation that we do. But our teams are continuing to work very hard to try to get us back to the standards where we are expecting to be. So I think it's going to be a process, but I think the process is well on the way.
You happy with the progress, Andy?
I am.
Okay, good. All righty. The only thing that before we adjourn, I do want to thank the board for their participation and you all for your ongoing participation in the annual fund. We had 100% participation from the ECMC Foundation board. With regard to our board, we only had 2 directors that did not respond and made a contribution in their name so that we can at least formally say that we've had 100% participation. So to those of you that have participated, thank you all very much. And I know Sue Gonzalez has done, as Tom said earlier, has done a great job overall. So thank you. Unless there are any other items or agenda items, questions for the good of the order, are there any?
It's Tony Colucci. I had a screen freeze for a moment. Did we get to the dates for next year's meeting?
I stand corrected, Counselor. You are exactly right. In my haste to adjourn, the contained in your packages, ladies and gentlemen, are the list of dates for our board meetings. And Tony has demanded that the board approve those dates. So I would be happy to entertain a motion.
I'll move approval.
Thank you. It's been seconded. Does anyone
Mike
object
Flynn.
to those dates? All in favor of approving the dates as presented, please signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed. Thank you. Counselor, is there anything else that I have forgotten?
No, thank you very much, John.
Thanks, Tony. So once again, for the good of the order, is there anything else that we need to talk about? Well, everyone, please stay warm, stay safe, and Tom and Andy and Karen and Dr. Murray, Dr. Cummings, thank you all very much once again. We stand adjourned. Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Stay safe,
Thank you,
everybody. Stay
Jennifer.
safe.
Happy New Year all.